If I were to ask you what the Amazing Digital Circus was, would you tell me it was just a game? That's the obvious answer, but is it the correct one? Hey there, hi there, Brother Hyde here, representing the Aegis insect of the Aegis cult, and today we will be examining the words of the Amazing Digital Circus. The Amazing Digital Circus Episode 7 dropped, and with it fell many long-standing theories about what the circus was, who made it, and how the human players could escape their digital purgatory. With only 2 episodes left to air, theorists are desperately scrambling to sift through the lies for kernels of truth. Last week, I watched an Amazing Digital Circus fan theory by Spooky Dude. You can click on that here. I'll make sure there's a link. This theory was called the Soma Theory, and I highly recommend watching that video if you're unfamiliar with the theory or the evidence supporting it. For the rest of you, assuming you just want spoilers, a short breakdown goes something like this. These human players aren't actually humans at all. They're just digitized copies of human minds. That might explain the how is going on, but I want to ask different questions. What is going on, and why is going on? What is the Amazing Digital Circus, and why was it made? I believe that there is enough circumstantial evidence flying under all of our noses to get a rough picture. I know I'm still missing a lot, and like with all good foreshadowing, we will see more in hindsight. But with the Soma Theory being the current top dog, I want to go back to episode 3 and re-examine it with our current knowledge of the circus from episode 7. Before we begin, I want to throw out my speculation. We know that the Amazing Digital Circus is full of foreshadowing, and it's my speculation that the father in the Manor Adventure, Baron Mildenhall, was probably a direct parallel to Kinger. His story is meant to parallel Kinger's own story. With that idea in mind, let's begin the breakdown of Episode 7. When Pomni and Kinger enter the mature path of the adventure, they find themselves in a room with mounted heads. We see the heads of Jax, Ragatha, Pomni, Kinger, Gangle, and Zubul on the walls. Zubul's my favorite. And in the most prominent place of display, right above the mantle, the head of what we later know to be an angel. This single scene is chock full of symbolism. First and foremost, every non-abstracted human player is represented here. The heads have been mounted on these walls. They're displayed alongside the severed head of this angel. Look at the way the camera spins to display all of these heads, including the angels. The way this is all presented in this framing suggests a certain circularity or continuity, a connection between one head and the next, and so on and so on. The intent of this framing is likely to tell us, the viewer, that the human players are like the angel in some way, or at least their heads are. But let's delve deeper into the symbolism here. The most obvious point is that the head has been separated from the body. We don't even give it a second thought, because these are supposed to be mounted hunting trophies. But what if it is foreshadowing of the Soma Theory? I think here that the separation of a head from a body is there to hint to us viewers that the minds of these characters, mind often thought to be stored in the brain in our heads, has been separated from the players' bodies. Their bodies have been cut off, rather their heads have been cut off, just like the angels. And not only removed, but through taxidermy, preserved in some fashion, just like the minds are being preserved in the digital realm as code. Next, let's look at these horrific expressions, and they really are. They're exaggeratedly grotesque, right? Like, look at these expressions. There's horror, confusion, despair, chaos. Zubul even has a hand growing out of their head. It's almost a mocking representation of their body image issues. These heads, these minds, have been horrifically altered by the process of being cut off from their bodies, and then preserved in this manner. And isn't that horror, that despair, that confusion, what these human players felt when they first woke up in the Amazing Digital Circus? It certainly is what Pomni felt. One final tidbit about these heads. They've been mounted. Mounted here is a key word. There are different kinds of taxidermy, right? Kinds that preserve the entire body of an animal. But mounting the head was specifically chosen for this scene. This could just be to show the separation of the brain from the body, but I think it would be silly not to discuss the word mounting when we're talking about a digital circus. Mounting is a term not only commonly found in the physical construction of computers, but also in the construction of digital file hierarchies. When you put a physical component of a computer into its proper place, that's called mounting that piece of hardware, right? So you can mount a hard drive where it needs to go, you can mount the motherboard where it needs to go, that's called mounting. But more important than that physical process of mounting components, which we could see the human heads being a sort of component, I think the more interesting thing here is that you can mount information, you can mount files. The other sort of mounting in computing is a logical one found in operating systems. Mounting in an operating system is a process by which a given operating system, we would know them like Windows or Linux, makes stored files accessible. The operating system integrates files from potentially disparate storage devices, say the hard drive, an SSD, USB drives, anything you want. Just different pieces from different places, and it puts them all together in an accessible way. It unifies the files under one system. That's a simplified and possibly wrong, through simplification, way of explaining things, but that's really all you need to know, that we're creating a hierarchy for access of files. Yeah. And we could think about the individual human minds being mounted like files into a unified file system. In this case, the Amazing Digital Circus itself. That's enough about heads for now, but we'll get back to it later. Let's move on to the Baron himself.
Hunting has been a hobby of mine for as long as I can remember, although one could say it eventually became more of an obsession. The creature you see before you is one I've been pursuing for years. Not quite a man, but not quite an animal. Something unholy, something evil. I took it upon myself to spend every waking moment doing all I could to protect my family from the creature, hoping that when I'd eventually killed it, I would be freed from this awful feeling, this inescapable dread. I was wrong.
These are the words the Baron spoke, not from his own mouth, but from a recording, a tape, a sort of copy of his voice. And as we find out later, one made from beyond the grave. He's already dead when he's making these recordings, which is also very interesting. And what does he speak of? Obsession, years of hunting or searching for a specific thing, in this case, an angel. He wants to kill this creature, the angel, because he wants to protect his family, and he believes that in killing this angel, he will protect his family.
Things have gotten far worse than I could ever have imagined. My paranoia had driven me to the point where I was no longer the protector my wife and theoretical children needed. Jumping at every shadow, every noise, I ended up shooting the love of my life, mistaking her for the creature. It's ironic, isn't it? In my attempts to protect her, I ended up becoming the monster myself. Now I wait down in my cellar, no longer having anything to protect but my own soul. If nothing else, I will slay the beast that took everything from me.
He even mistakes this creature for his wife, and yet he still feels a need to kill it, in order to feel some kind of freedom from something. I'm not entirely sure what, but maybe we can figure it out together. And immediately after these words, Kinger says something very interesting. You know, I'm starting to think, but he never finishes the thought. I think Kinger has recognized something familiar in Baron Mildenhall's story. I think Kinger's a smart guy. He probably realized that this story is just a kind of distorted version of his own. What do we think we know about Kinger? It's presumed that Kinger got a degree in computer science and worked in coding, probably for C and A if they really exist. We know from when he spoke about Queenie that he used to hate bugs, but she, as an entomologist, made him love them. Many fans have speculated that the bugs he hated were the kind in code, not necessarily the creepy crawly kind. We could further speculate that in parallel to the Baron's obsession, Kinger hunted bugs in his code, much how Mildenhall hunted something neither animal nor man. In this case, that would just leave what? Plants, machines, fungi? Code? Who knows? I think it means bugs, and if the story parallels Kinger's, then Kinger must have had a reason to feel like his family would be safe after a specific bug he obsessed over was squashed. But like Mildenhall, he faced failure after failure, developed paranoia, and experienced successive stress events until his breaking point. And in order to break the deadlock with whatever issue he was facing, he finally touched upon something holy, something utterly taboo. Let me paint you a picture. A picture where Baron Mildenhall's story parallels the real-world Kinger's story. Kinger was a promising computer scientist who got hired to create an AI system. He struggled to hunt down all the bugs and provide a satisfying product. He faced being fired, or his project faced being closed, and he felt like his family's livelihood was threatened. Much like the Baron mistaking his wife for the creature, perhaps Kinger projected his stresses from the project onto his wife. But Kinger kept working until he decided to try something a little unusual, something taboo. He decided to use something often considered one of God's miracles, a real human brain, the consequences of which still haunt him to this day. Now, I don't think he actually used the brain itself. He made a copy of a brain, and he uploaded that into the system that he was working on, and perhaps it worked. Now, I don't think it is as simple as all that. The part about mistaking his wife for the creature seems more literal than what I'm giving it credit for here. My interpretation's very abstract. And I think the problem is, I think I'm failing to untangle which Kinger experienced what part of the Baron's stories. We have to remember there are two different Kingers in the Amazing Digital Circus. There's the original real-world Kinger, and then there's the Kinger copy in the Digital Circus, if Soma Theory is true. And figuring out which part goes to which Kinger is the hard part for me. But, leaving that for now, let's skip a bit forward to a clearer line. Listen carefully to what Mildenhal says here.
My paranoia had driven me to the point where I was no longer the protector my wife and theoretical children needed.
Did you catch that? One line in particular stands out. I'm no longer capable of protecting my wife or theoretical children. That's oddly specific, isn't it? Kinger, if we trust that Queenie was a copied human, had an actual wife, not a theoretical one. Real world. And if Baron Mildenhall's story is meant to parallel Kinger's, then we must then assume that Kinger had theoretical children. So who were Kinger's theoretical children? One could argue Cain is a theoretical child. He is an AI personality that Kinger helped to create, or, if you'll forgive the phrasing, birth into the digital world. And to him, perhaps Cain is like a child. And perhaps his project, failing to meet expectations, was threatened to be shut down. Cain was in danger. But that's only one theoretical child in danger. Mildenhall very specifically said, theoretical children. It's possible then that the other theoretical children are these copies of the human characters. I don't think the timeline fits. These copies, like Pomni, wouldn't have existed yet to be threatened by whatever issue the real-world Kinger was facing. And I don't think any of them would have existed yet without a good reason, which we just don't have yet. Why was the digital circus created? Why does it exist as it does? We don't have a good enough reason to suggest that there would have been another human player there. Not even Scratch if he was the first abstraction. Not even Kinger if he was the first one in the digital circus. We just don't have a reason. But I think there could be a darker interpretation. What if, in order to get his project to actually work, Kinger had to copy the brain or the mind of an actual child? That's the taboo. That's the big sin he committed. He needed to touch upon the pure little brain of a pure little baby angel. Now, this is where we have to speculate quite a bit. I will remind you of the questions I wanted to ask, though. What is the Amazing Digital Circus, and why does it exist? Specifically, why does it exist as it does? First, what do we think we know about the circus? We think we know it's a digital world of sorts. It can be interacted with via a headset, but players can't seem to leave upon putting on the headset. Inside of this digital world exists Kane, an entity that is only good at creating adventures, in his own words.
Making adventures is my art! It's all I exist to do, all I'm good at.
Making adventures is my art. It's all I exist to do. And it is possible that the original circus, Kinger's original project and theoretical child, which failed, was made to be a game. But if it is still a game, why can't the headsets be removed? Why can't players leave the circus? This isn't designed like a game. This is designed like a liability. And if they can leave the circus, if the headsets can be removed, why do they create a digital copy of a person's mind when put on? That's dark, isn't it? There's got to be something, a clear reason for why that's the case. A clear reason why that happens like it does. If we were to assume that CNA, the creators of the Amazing Digital Circus, so we presume, was a greedy corporation, perhaps it would create a system like this to mine data from the participants and use their intelligence in some way to create better AI. But that's the kind of greedy corporation story that Episode 7 seems to point against. I don't buy that being the case, so we have to look elsewhere, I think. I think we need to come up with a reason, a good enough reason, why these headsets seem to make a copy of a human mind when interacted with. Why they exist at all. I think it's possible that the headset was originally intended to be used to immerse oneself in the world of the circus, a virtual reality game, if you will, but it seems to do so much more now. New features were added after the fact. Instead of just interacting with the circus, the headset now copies the brain to exist in the circus? Why? Here's why. I don't think the copy of the Amazing Digital Circus accessed through this particular headset, which Kane says has been cut off, is intended to be a game at all. It's a clone of the original. It's a repurposing of the original. It's a side project. If the Amazing Digital Circus is not a game, as evidenced by the inability for players to leave once they've entered, why is Kane's purpose still to create adventures? If one part has been repurposed, cut off, and assigned new tasks, why hasn't the other part been changed? I think Kane was honest about wanting to keep minds stimulated, but why are these adventures that he comes up with so childish and child-friendly? Why can't you swear in the circus? Why can't Zubul get what Zubul wants? I think it's because they're made for a child, or by a child, the mind of one at least. Now this is where it gets really crazy, and we have to speculate a whole lot more. I have less evidence for any of this, but there is still some. I think the Amazing Digital Circus is a piece of art with intention. It isn't every frame's a painting, but I think if the characters point to something, then we should pay attention to what they're pointing at. I think much like the heads mounted on the wall in Mildenhall's manor, we will see a circle of connection between different themes and ideas, or even just objects presented in different episodes. And where else did we see something related to a child? In episode 7, Jax remembers or sees images of the real world. Whether or not those are his memories, I can't say. They seem to be, which is good enough for me. Let's work under that assumption. These real-world flashbacks Jax experienced showed a slow children in area sign. So my idea is, what if he hit a child? I think a lot of people have come to that conclusion, and that's why he doesn't want to go back. He feels guilty over hitting a child. But if he did hit a child, what happened to the child? Perhaps he put that child into a coma, or worse. And perhaps that child wasn't just a random child. Perhaps it was a child of Kinger and Queenie, the real-world ones. Do I have any evidence at all for that claim? Surely I can't, right? Well, actually, no. But I do have an odd connection. We have good reason to accept my interpretation of the severed angel head representing Kinger's wife. He even says directly to the angel, "You look beautiful, honey," as if he is seeing his wife. And yes, I originally thought that this might just be the flashing eyes in the blackness looking like an abstracted Queenie, but the point stands either way. The show is explicitly drawing a connection between this severed angel head and Kinger's wife. So if we accepted a severed head being linked to Kinger's family, his wife, then we have to look at other instances of severed heads in the series associated with Kinger. And believe it or not, there are more, or at least another one. This disembodied head imagery is surprisingly repeated in the Pomni as President segment when Kinger pulls Pomni under the desk. What does he do? He turns on a baby head lamp. A lamp made from a baby's head. Pomni specifically looks at the baby head and asks, "Is that a baby head?" "Yes, Pomni, yes it is. That is a baby head lamp." The show itself is telling us to look at this baby head lamp and to acknowledge it. This baby head has been turned into a tool, a piece of technology, for a purpose. Furthermore, I find it kind of interesting that it lights up, and we'll get into that a bit later. Or maybe I won't, maybe I'll forget. But remember that it is a tool that lights up. It's a neat little theory, right? This would explain why the circus was created, to revive the theoretical child in some way. It also explains why there is a headset to interact with the circus. Because Kinger and Queenie wanted to interact with their child. And perhaps Jack's presence too could be explained by this headset, because he felt so guilty about what he did to this child that he wanted to interact with it in some way, whether to apologize or spend time with it, and give it a life that he felt like he took away. But the child might not have been happy in a digital void, only receiving occasional visits or glimpses into the outside world. It certainly doesn't seem to be the case that the people in the circus enjoy the circus. I can't imagine a child would be happy in that kind of environment either. I think that Kinger created or repurposed a copy of Kane and the Amazing Digital Circus to endlessly entertain this digital child with these child-safe adventures, to provide stimulation when he and his wife couldn't visit. And when that failed, he used the headsets that initially allowed him to interact with the digital child to create copies of his mind and the mind of anyone who put it on. He did this to transfer those copies of his and his wife's consciousness into the circus to reunite the family permanently in some way, or at least to give the digital child a family of sorts. Only, Kinger didn't get the happy storybook ending, did he? Let's look at another line that could clue us into the real-world Kinger's past.
I'm guessing the souls are attracted to living things, just want a vessel to be able to leave with. Man, 7 years of computer science for this, huh?
These two thoughts seem at first to be disconnected. The chaotic rambling of a jokey, crazed character. But what if they aren't? What if they're perfectly connected? What if both ideas here are talking about his own experiences? What if the first idea is him talking about the experience of his wife and theoretical child, the souls or the minds of his wife and child, which were uploaded into the circus. They probably just wanted to escape the circus to exit like Pomni or any of the others. What if they were so obsessed with exiting back into the real world, back into their real life, and back into what they thought they had waiting for them? And what if Kinger, being the one who uploaded these minds into the circus in the first place, was the only one who knew that they could never leave, or that these copies weren't the real people that they thought they were, that nothing was out there waiting for them? And worse yet, what if he told them the truth? That Queenie was not his wife, that his child was not his actual child, or that he wasn't even himself, he wasn't the real Kinger, he was just a digital copy? And what if he felt that it wasn't real either? What if he truly believed that? And finally, out of his interactions with this digital family he created, especially with Queenie, demonstrated the fact that he thought they weren't real, that they weren't the family he wanted or the ones he loved from the real world. Remember what Kinger tells Pomni.
In this world, the worst thing you can do is make someone think they're not wanted or loved.
In this world, the circus, the worst thing you can do is to make someone think they're not wanted or loved. This isn't just random rambling, this is the wisdom of experience speaking. He is telling Pomni something that he did, something he learned through experience. Kinger couldn't reconcile the uploaded mind of his wife with his actual wife. He made her feel unwanted and unloved because she was a copy of what he wanted, not what he wanted. And perhaps that's why she abstracted. After she learned that, after she felt isolated, after she felt betrayed, it's only in retrospect that he accepted her as his wife. It was all too late. After she abstracted, he felt regret. He realized that even if they were just copies, they were still what they had left. That's all they had. They didn't have to be just copies, though. They could be something new. Somewhere in the back of his mind, he accepted himself not as the coder Kinger, but the unique digital Kinger that had hurt his unique digital wife. And much like Baron Mildenhall, who killed his wife mistaking it for a creature, Kinger accidentally killed his digital wife through abstraction, thinking she was a digital creature, neither animal nor machine, but also not his wife. Now, let's get back to the glowing, right? Remember that I said the baby head lamp glowed with a bright light? I think that's another association with Kinger. Kinger is in a hell of his own creation. He broke a taboo regarding human life in the prideful belief that he could control life and death, that he knew better than nature, that his will was more important than the desires of his wife or child. It's almost fitting that Episode 3 saw Kinger descend to literal hell. He was a Kinger in hell. The Kinger of hell. The King of Hell. Here's a fun fact for you. Lucifer is another name for the devil, but it means light bringer. And guess who else brought light into the darkness of hell when he held his breath? That's right. When Kinger holds his breath, he shines. He brings forth light. Anyway, Lucifer's sin was also born of pride and the desire to force free will onto humans, knowledge of good and evil specifically. And Kinger has many parallels to Lucifer there too. Now sure, he tried to give knowledge of good and evil, maybe even free will, to artificial intelligence entities like Cain, but I don't think that's the parallel. His issue was that he told copied minds the truth of their existences. He gave them the knowledge that they weren't actually the real people. He told copied minds the truth of their existences, not as real people trapped in a game, but as digital minds, digital copies of an original. And he feels responsible for or the consequences of those actions. He says to Pomni, "I'm the reason we took this path, aren't I?"
It was my fault we went down this path, wasn't it? I'm really sorry for that.
I'm sorry for that. This isn't just about taking the path for mature Zoobles only in the adventure. It's about his role in creating this digital circus to begin with. He is the king of it all, or at least the coder Kinger was. Now, I don't think all of this is correct, but I do think that Baron Mildenhall's story is meant to parallel Kinger's story. The hardest part for me is trying to separate what plausibly happened to the human Kinger and what likely happened to the digital circus Kinger. I think those two Kingers might be being referenced at different points in Mildenhall's stories, and not necessarily neatly. I think they could be out of chronological order. Of course, if you have anything to add, feel free. Please do argue against anything that doesn't make sense. Leave me a comment, and I'll give it a thought. But for now, thanks for sticking around through the jumble of digital hallucinations. I'll see you again next time. Hyde out.